Hello! Passionate about sustainability, energy and climate? You're in the right place. Welcome to Energetic. I'm Maureen Cornelis, and together we will engage with people who dedicate their lives to climate justice and making a just energy transition happen. They may be activists, scientists, policymakers, or other enthusiasts, just like you. Let the life stories and insights inspire you to build a better future for people and the planet. Welcome to this special episode of Energetic. Today is a different format. I recorded it as a vox pop during the European Sustainable Energy Week, a flagship event focused on sustainable and renewable energy development, steering many European policies. EUSEF, as we name it, is home to many insightful discussions and brings forward innovative ideas, reinforcing Europe's commitment to achieve its ambitious climate and energy goals. Some voices you will hear in this pod will certainly sound familiar, as they've already been on the show. I thought it would be a great moment to take the temperature in Brussels and ask a few people about Europe's energy and climate journey and priorities for the years to come. Can Europe keep on being a climate leader? And how? So I asked two questions. What should be the energy and climate policy priorities in the years to come? And do you think those discussions at EUSEF are reflecting these priorities? Their takes are important because after the elections, I've been feeling that the EU is like the dog who had just caught the bus. Where is it going now? The EU has worked hard to attain many objectives, including the now famous Green Deal, but it is now unsure what to do with it. Many EUSEF sessions focused on industrial competitiveness, security of supply, or raw materials. But is it enough? So as you'll hear, without surprise, my guest mentioned the word enforcement and implementation several times. We have the means of transportation. Now we actually need to get to the destination, right? But several people, including me, seemed worried that the human dimension of the energy transition was overlooked. And this overlook risks creating further imbalances and divisions and political polarization of what should actually be a global project for the common good. On my side, the session I chaired focused on local solutions for fairness and inclusivity in delivering this European Green Deal at the city level. Local authorities understand better than anyone the issues at stake, and the speakers shared incredibly inspiring stories from New York City to Besançon on ways to include citizens in energy policies and overcome energy poverty, and also programs that support people and their environments through community solar energy development. By equipping people with the right solutions, they become agents of change. They build or rebuild their lives as they fix their homes and communities. And sharing is empowering because if we know we can make it there, we can make it everywhere, right? On the other hand, I know you can't jump in a bus and hope it'll take you where you need. People, you and I, must be able to participate in building this necessary transition. Human needs must stay central in building sustainable societies. So it's not only about economic competitiveness. It's about narratives. It's about hearing people's opinion and input, even if you don't like them. So more than ever, now is the time for policies to be implemented and delivered in member states and at national and local level in a way that is truly fair and inclusive of the populations. So it's also time for extra communication efforts, starting with uncomfortable conversations. I strongly recommend you to check the back catalog for more insights on all the topics. I hope you enjoyed this episode, so please email me or send me a message on LinkedIn to tell me what you think. So thank you so much, Jaume Lofredo from SmartN, for being with me today. So what are the key priorities of EUSEF this year, and how do you really see the priorities of the challenges that we will need to overcome in the next 5 years in the energy sector?
Well, clearly, like EUSEF this year, but also in the past years, it's focused on how do we deploy more renewables at fast enough pace so that we can achieve the energy transition. And what we are seeing now is that we've been relatively good at having more wind, having a lot more solar in a lot of countries. But the problem that we're facing right now is that what we are seeing is that there's a lot of congestion in electricity grids with a negative pricing in many countries, which make the the value proposition of solar less interesting for both for industry but also for simple households who want to put a solar panel on their rooftop. So what's going to be important in the next legislative term is to try to finally unlock flexibility from consumers. So nudging consumers to use energy flexibly, so they use more electricity when you have lots of production of solar energy and of wind energy, and using less when instead we still rely a lot on gas power plants. And these will be beneficial for two reasons. First of all, this means relying less on fossil fuels and further accelerating the energy transition. But most importantly, this also means addressing the big barrier that we're seeing right now, that is an electricity infrastructure. Electricity infrastructure at the moment is not fit for the level of deployment of renewable energy that we want to see, for good reasons, in the next few years. So harnessing flexibility and making sure that people use that electricity when it's produced and it doesn't get into electricity grids would be fundamental if we want to achieve our climate targets.
And do you think this topic of the infrastructure is being addressed enough these days at European Sustainable Energy Week?
To some extent it is, but I still see too much focus on grids as in physical infrastructure, as in building more cables, building more towers, while what is going to be important, it's not very well reflected, is digitalization of the electricity grids to unlock flexibility, because again, this is going to be a faster and cheaper way to address these problems. And as we know, like the energy transition, if you want public acceptance for the energy transition, it's important that it happens at the lowest possible cost. And this is going to be the key to achieve this goal.
Julie Kiestrup from Velux and BPIA. So what are, in your view, the biggest priorities for the years to come with the new term?
Well, I'm going to say something boring that pretty much everyone agrees on, which is implementation, or delivery, as I like to call it, because that sounds a lot more active. We've had great success the last 5 years in terms of the legislative framework, but now, of course, we need to make sure that's implemented at national level, because otherwise we're not going to derive any of the benefits that we are set out to achieve.
And do you think that those issues are sufficiently addressed during USEF?
Yes, in theory. But again, I mean, what then comes after USEF, of course, is a really interesting bit. And I mean, I'm myself here because I'm moderating a session on behalf of Efficient Buildings Europe on exactly how to scale up industrial partnerships for renovation uptake across member states. And I think those sorts of sessions where we're very sort of tactically getting people together with different viewpoints across different sorts of up and down the value chain are very, very useful, because that's how you make connections, that's how you exchange best practice, and that's also how hopefully you get a bit of courage to say, actually, this is feasible, others have done it. And if we pull each other's good thoughts and practices, then we will arrive there.
A good platform for discussion then.
Absolutely.
Anna Gombau, what is according to you the main priorities the EU needs to address regarding energy and energy policies in the coming term? And the second question is, what are your key takeaways so far from USEF?
I think for the next 5 years, the main priorities that we're going to be seeing is how do we deliver on the objectives that we have set for ourselves. So, I mean, we came back from a legislative cycle that has been very regulatory heavy and have laid, all the ground for the legislation and how do we implement the legislation that are going to take us to our targets for 2030 and to a large extent also towards 2050. And now the question is also, now how do we get there? And the next commission will have a crucial role on ensuring that the implementation is right and to address any potential crises that we might find, or difficulties and challenges that we might find on the way, so that we can meet these objectives. This is on the one hand, precisely because this past commission has been so heavy on the regulatory side. I think this upcoming commission will be very heavy on the investment side of things. There's so many billions that we need to unlock in order to make the energy transition happen. And we need to find exactly this right balance between, the public finance and then how do we unlock investor certainty in terms of capital markets and private financing. So I think a big role and a big discussion that we're going to have and something that we really need to deliver in the next 5 years is, okay, like how do we ensure that we unlock all the finance necessary to deliver on these objectives? Because otherwise, we're just not going to get there.
And do you think that the current discussions that you've been hearing here at USEF are reflecting on those priorities?
I think so. I think USEF has also made very clear the shift that we're seeing on the narrative about the energy transition, from the point of view that we have moved in just a couple of years to talk heavily about consumer protection, for instance, to the question of competitiveness in industry. And we see what's a clear priority right now compared to just 2 years ago in the peak of the energy crisis. So this is how we see the questions around competitiveness and strategic autonomy reflected in the program of the Sustainable Energy Week. This is also what we have seen in the manifestos of the political groups for the past elections, and what we are going to be seeing, the commitments we're going to be seeing also in the years to come from the Commission in the next Parliament.
Marco Gervasi from AN. So my first question is, what do you think should the priorities be of the energy sector in the next 5 years? We just had the election.
Yeah, indeed. My recommendation for the future Commissioner of Energy, it is to focus on interconnecting Europe from the electricity point of view and to build a more strong, flexible energy market with storage system and investing in the stability of the grids as well.
That's really interesting that you mentioned this, because it was in the Green Deal. Isn't it about delivery?
It is about delivery, but what was planned, I think, was not taking account how much the increasing of renewable energy stalled has been that fast. So basically now we have a huge problem. We have congestion in all European grids and we don't have solution. So we need to invest more money and to deliver even the next 5 years.
And do you think the current USEF, like the European Sustainability Week where we are meeting now, do you think that they are putting enough emphasis on this particular issue?
For the conferences I followed, yes, has been on the spot, this kind of topic, but I think it should be much more pragmatical. Like everyone was saying, we need to have more flexible grids, we need to be much more interconnected, but how? I would have loved to hear more how rather than just what's the problem.
Professoressa Lucia Ruggeri. So, Lucia, what should be, according to you, the priorities of the European Commission, energy-wise, regarding in the next 5 years, in the coming term?
In my opinion, the best choice for the future of energy policy is to imagine more connection, more relationship with the citizen, small enterprises, small companies in all of Europe. To do that, we need more equity, more inclusivity, solidarity. Is a difficult path because we need to overcome the freedom of contract. We need to check better the situation in the reality. So we need to put as priority to the effectiveness of the energy policy. Is an urgent time for the Europe to realize a more relationship with the people.
Do you think that the USEF this year is reflecting those kind of priorities?
I think the today USEF is important because we started to imagine the combination between digitalization and the energy delivery. So it's important because it's focused on competitiveness of the European Union. But in the future, I think we need to put our attention on effectiveness of energy rights.
Jad Mouawad, what should be, let's say, the energy priorities in the next 5 years, in your view?
So, I think we've made a huge amount of strides in the last 5-10 years, in fact, in terms of where we are today in the energy transition. I think let's take a second here and sort of reflect on the tremendous growth we've seen in renewables and even the policy debates and the understanding of the solutions we need. But I think the next 5 years, like to 2030, are critical. And here we need to also acknowledge that we need something like a fresh thinking on how to get to sort of a next level, because I think even today's business as usual, which again is very, very strong, our new business as usual would have been unheard about or unbelievable 10 years ago. That new business as usual is not going to get us to where we need to be in 5 years, in 10 years, and by 2050 to get to net zero. So I think we may be at an inflection point today where we need to rethink our public approach, our policy approach, maybe our political approaches on how we can get to that next level. I'm an optimist, so I'm going to look at the glass half full, that we have this opportunity to kind of rethink our approach, to rethink our political positioning around the transition. I'm not going to take the glass half empty approach, given what's going on in Europe and elsewhere in terms of populism. But I really feel like now is the time where collectively we need to maybe even reinvent a discourse, a story about why we need the transition, why we need to even accelerate on today's rates to get us to 2050 in the place we need to be in net zero.
And do you think the USEF this year is reflecting those big macro trends that we need to go in, or the direction where we need to go?
Yeah, so I think we've heard over the last 3 days a lot of those themes. I think there's a real understanding that, we need strong policy, we need strong regulations, we need a strong involvement from the EU, obviously, from member states, from all of the stakeholders. I'd like to see more urgency here in Brussels, but also across Europe and elsewhere on accelerating this trend and getting us there much, much faster.
Lorraine Claffey from from Energy Traders Europe, this time I'm not mistaken. So what should the priorities of energy policies be in the years to come?
So I would say, obviously, we're at a very important point in the Green Deal, shifting from ambition to implementation. So really working with member states so that we can have a coordinated European approach, because we all know that we're stronger together.
And do you think that the current USEF, this year's USEF, is reflecting this kind of big trends?
I think there's a lot of talk around reaching targets and some very interesting and relevant topics, but I think we probably need to dive a bit more into the nitty-gritty of how we get there.
Anna Bayomi from FENSA. So what do you think should the priorities be in the energy policy sector in the years to come?
The first priority would be to ring-fence funding for low-income and vulnerable groups, making sure that they are proportionally benefiting from energy efficiency and renewable funding, because otherwise they will be left behind. And another important priority would be to monitor the impact of green transition on vulnerable groups, such as low-income households living in unfit housing or unsecured tenureships, or households that still rely on fossil fuels and face difficulties to switch to green technologies due to their financial situation. And probably the result of the monitoring would be that the incomes are hitting more vulnerable groups than well-off groups. Therefore, policies that mitigate these kind of inequalities are essential. And the energy sector should cooperate with the social sector and vice versa, because otherwise people will be left behind and they might become angry also for green transition policies.
So it's very much about social justice, right? Do you think that this year's USEF is reflecting those kind of priorities?
I would say that partly yes. There were some really good sessions on energy poverty and on financing the green transition. But what I miss a bit is a general reflection on social impacts of different policies that are discussed in the green transition that we wouldn't think of first, that they have a social impact, but indeed energy is used by households, so even flexibility or any kind of really cool forward-looking policies have a distributional impact, most likely, that I think need to be addressed more specifically.
Max Joel from NYSEDA. So, Max, what do you think the energy policy priorities should be in the next 5 years?
So the biggest policy priority is really implementing the policies I've learned at this conference quite a bit about the European Green Deal, and in many ways it's similar to the United States policy framework, our Inflation Reduction Act, and different state policies like in New York State. And we're really in implementation mode now. We have some very good policies. Now we have to demonstrate that they're effective policies and put the funding to work, put the technical assistance to work, and really step up renewable energy development that's also inclusive renewable energy development.
And do you think that was demonstrated or shown during USEF?
I do think that was really demonstrated and shown during USEF. Some of those themes were across all of the sessions I attended, but even more so were really present in the conversations I had, just walking around outside the sessions, talking to people at the tables, and just at lunch. Everyone's, really focused on putting all the wonderful ideas and policies to work in their own communities and across Europe. So it was really exciting to see. I really appreciated the opportunity to join the conference.
That's really great to have somebody from the US to share things with us. Johannes Volmer from the European Renewable Energy Federation. So what should be the priorities, the energy priorities in the years to come?
Well, clearly for me is the acceleration of renewable energy development, and especially permit granting procedures that have to be accelerated and simplified. And there's a good EU framework for that. It takes 7 years in Germany to put a windmill. We have 5 years until we should reach the 2030 targets. I wonder how they're going to implement these acceleration areas in the Renewables Directive now in the member states. This is clearly a priority, but you also need to further develop and implement market designs for decentralized actors like energy communities, like self-consumers, like aggregators, like flexibility providers. And this is going to be key over the next years. And to your second question about whether this has been addressed at USEF, it has been addressed a lot. What is maybe lacking in some ways is how do we proceed and what kind of pressure and guidance the Commission can now provide to the member states in helping them to implement the policies that have been designed.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Energetic. It's been a pleasure diving deep into the world of sustainability and the just energy transition with some of the most forward-thinking mouths out there. I'm Maureen Cornelis, your host from policy consultancy Next Energy Consumer, and it's been an incredible journey growing this podcast together with you, our knowledgeable and passionate listeners. Since 2021, we've shared countless stories, insights, and ideas over more than 40 episodes, and it's all thanks to your support and enthusiasm. If you enjoyed our journey so far and want to help us keep the conversation going, why not support us on Patreon? Every bit helps us bring more inspiring content your way. Check out the show notes for the link. And hey, if you're a part of an organization that shares our passion for a sustainable and inclusive energy future, we're excited to explore sponsorship opportunities with you. It's a fantastic way to connect with a dedicated audience and make an even bigger impact together. Shout out to the fantastic Igor Mihailovich from Podcast Media Factory for his incredible sound design work, making every episode a joy to listen to. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to Energetic on your favorite podcast platform. And if you think a friend or a colleague could benefit from our episode, we'd love for you to spread the word. It helps us grow and keep the energy transition conversation alive. Sharing is caring. Follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn to stay engaged and update on all things energetic. Thanks once again for lending your ears. Until next time.